Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post. College diversity officers are not doing well right now. Their mental health is destroyed. Their physical health is suffering. They have hair loss. They're losing weight. They're having trouble sleeping at night. It's all in this article from Inside Higher Ed, and I'll go into it. It's not good to appreciate people suffering, but it is good to see people losing their positions of power when they're abusing that power to force racial discrimination at every level in colleges and universities. It's not good for the culture. It's not good for the people who are receiving benefits that they did not earn. And it's not good for the people that are not being given opportunities that they did earn. The reason that chief diversity officers at colleges and universities cannot find any peace and know that they have really no future is because they chose a career that on its face was illegal, and they knew it was wrong, and they did it anyway. From Inside Higher Ed, chief diversity officers are struggling. A recent report finds that CDOs are doing their best to navigate state-level DEI bans, but it's affecting their mental and physical health. Everyone in this position could have a great and fast recovery, but they need to leave this position. Stop doing things that you know are wrong, and stop trying to set your entire life out to push a racist agenda. These guys are suffering even before Trump got into office and was able to make some of his moves and apply some pressure. As fairness returns and merit returns to colleges and universities across the country, it's only going to get worse for the people trying to push something that they know is absolutely wrong. Campus chief diversity officers are under significant pressure as state and now federal DEI bans proliferate. Their work has been repeatedly questioned, rebranded, or slashed in recent years, and they've been tasked with difficult decisions about how to respond. It's taking a toll on them, according to a recent report by researchers at the University of Michigan and George Mason University. All that was even before Donald Trump was reelected. The report based its findings on hour-long qualitative interviews with 40 chief diversity officers conducted between November 2023 and June 2024. It's only gotten worse for them since then. The interviews were conducted in states with proposed or enacted laws or executive orders against DEI or critical race theory. If your career is dependent on DEI or critical race theory, you better leave that career while there's still time because people are just ruining their lives over this. There's no future for that. You can hate people based on their skin color in your own personal time. Don't try to make a career out of it. The report found that CDOs took a variety of approaches to navigating an increasingly hostile political environment, and the challenges of doing so have had a detrimental impact on their health and careers. Jeffrey Grimm, a co-author of the report and assistant professor of higher education at George Mason, said chief diversity officers generally, quote, came in wanting to help all faculty, staff, and students excel and be successful. And university leaders eagerly hired them to do so, publicizing their work during the national reckoning over the death of George Floyd in 2020. Now, diversity officers report feeling not just stressed and anxious, but also socially isolated from other executive level leaders because of growing tensions around DEI work in their states. Well, the minute this became an uncomfortable political situation, the chief diversity officers were left out to dry, Grimm said. Nobody should feel isolated and wrong for doing the job that they were hired to do. We all know right from wrong. We're all grown up. We have parents. We go to school. We live in society. We know right from wrong. And if you feel sick and you don't feel well and you're stressed out and you can't sleep, it's because you're a chief diversity officer, or it's because you know you're doing something wrong and you're going to wake up the next day and you're going to try to do the wrong thing again. All these guys have to do is leave this field, find something legitimate to do, go sell insurance or something, but get out of this race-based business. While the interviews were conducted before Trump took office, chief diversity officers' fears and anxieties have only escalated since the administration put out anti-DEI directives of its own, according to Caleb L. Briscoe, assistant professor of adult and higher education at the University of Oklahoma, who had also conducted research on diversity officers' experiences under DEI bans. That's this lady. Yes, her name is Caleb. Quote, the federal climate has only further exacerbated the mental and physical health challenges, she said. Quote, they feel the weight of it. The report outlines some ways chief diversity officers have met the challenges posed by proposed or implemented state DEI bans. Most chief diversity officers reported taking what the report calls a pro-action approach to pending DEI legislation, making changes in response, even if not yet legally mandatory, to try to deflect any further political meddling on their campuses. What they would do is they would try to get ahead of getting in trouble with legislators. If they make changes that don't upset elected officials, that show elected officials they're starting to get a little bit more reasonable with how they're doing business, maybe the elected officials will ignore them and not target them with legislation. That has worked in some situations. And it creates a sense of self-censoring, which is something that you do want to do. You don't want to censor people if what they're saying is appropriate, but if they're doing racist stuff, then yeah, you do want to stop them and you want to get them quieted down so they stop attacking people based on their race. Here's an example. Some preemptively renamed or reorganized DE offices and programs adopted new terminology or changed their communication strategies. Others, facing already enacted DEI bans, described having to eliminate staff positions and student support services. Even as they were making such changes, some chief diversity officers engaged in dialogue with governing board members and state lawmakers in the hopes of heading off any future policies that could further limit DEI. That approach proved successful for some weathering political storms, Grimm said. Quote, and when I say successful, sometimes success doesn't mean saving your division. Sometimes it means getting people jobs once your division was completely dissolved. It's just really a disturbing time for anybody who cares about diversity or identity or thought in higher education. And these people know they're lucky to have a job to go to after doing all of this that they knew was wrong, creating a department with power over a school and using that power to discriminate against people. Some chief diversity officers embraced an approach the report calls strategic inaction, meaning they didn't make any organizational or structural changes, avoiding early or unnecessary compliance with potential or future anti-DEI policies. They also sought advice from colleagues at other institutions in the state or peers in states with similar legislation. Quote, I'm not considering shifting until I have to. I've been doing this long enough to not be shaken by things that I shouldn't be shaken by. I've seen it all, said a chief diversity officer, anonymously quoted in the report. All of these guys are on borrowed time. They know what they're doing is not legitimate. They know eventually every college and every university is going to be forced to follow the law. You cannot discriminate against people at work based on their race, or their gender, or their sexual preferences. Chief diversity officers are not doing so well. The report found that many chief diversity officers were shaken by their experiences of being scrutinized or mischaracterized by DEI opponents. Some described feeling silenced, uncertain about their job security, and isolated from other executive leaders. Quote, some CDOs really talked about how they felt like kryptonite on their campus, Grimm said. Their president and provost wouldn't talk to them anymore. Nobody wanted to collaborate just because they didn't want this unwanted political attention. The report found that chief diversity officers were overwhelmed with stress and anxiety and struggling with their mental health. Some reported physical symptoms like hypertension and sleep problems. Briscoe said these results are consistent with her study on the experiences of entry and mid-level diversity professionals under state DEI bans. But it was jarring to her that chief diversity officers, executive-level administrators interviewed for the report seemed to feel just as isolated as the staff under them included in her study. Quote, these are individuals who should have the most autonomy to do this work, to make decisions about this moment, she said. Yet they feel ignored and shut out of these decisions by other university leaders. Because even when these people are doing what they call work, their work involves putting unrealistic demands on everyone involved in the process of doing literally anything. Students who are not qualified need to be treated like they are qualified. Teachers need to consider things and grade people on a basis that doesn't reflect the actual work that the people are doing. There's no purpose in going to a school, going to a university, if you're not really going to learn, if you're not really going to be challenged, if you're just going to be given a higher grade because of your sexual preference or your skin color. And these people are walking in. Everyone involved in that process, even the professor, and they could be a woke professor, they really have no purpose of being there if they're not going to help teach and help students learn what they need to learn for that course, even if it's a nonsense course. Trying to force these DEI ideas into a process is just adding friction into a process, which makes everyone uncomfortable. It's like having a language barrier. When there's a language barrier, you're trying to work with someone or communicate with someone, it makes it more difficult. Sometimes you can't do anything about that. That's just the people you're working with. But can you imagine introducing language barriers? Here's an idea. Here's your textbook. It's in a language you don't really know. We're going to change it from English to Spanish. Maybe you had a year or two of Spanish in high school. So we're just going to change all of your textbooks to Spanish. Why? Diversity. Okay, now learn all of these things, but learn it in a language you don't even completely understand. Let's just add as much friction to the process as possible. If you research physics a little bit, friction is not something you want in any process or any system. You're trying to remove friction, and these guys are the friction. Quote, it's apparent in this report. It's apparent from the data that I have. The stress, anxiety, the fatigue, and trauma. CDOs are not well, she said. Quote, the reality is they're constantly having to worry about not just their own livelihood, but the livelihoods of staff members, the sustainability of programs. This is their legacy. This is their work. Sean Harper, university professor and provost professor of education, business and public policy at the University of Southern California, and an Inside Higher Ed contributor, said he's seen in real time how chief diversity officers are struggling. Harper is in the process of creating a documentary about the experiences of diversity officers as state and federal attacks on DEI continue to ramp up. Quote, imagine waking up every day, wondering if today is the day that you're going to be fired, said Harper. Quote, people are losing weight, they're losing their hair, they're experiencing gastrointestinal issues, all because of the stress of this ridiculous time. The stress that you brought on, because what you do is not wanted, it's not legal, it's not decent, and it needs to stop. And people who are in the gears of this machinery are going to continue to suffer for the friction they created until they're removed from the college and university system. He said one lingering question is, what will happen to their careers? Are universities repurposing chief diversity officers in other roles or firing them? And where do those forced out or burned out end up? Quote, at some point, we will move beyond this current moment, Harper said. So for those who survive in their roles, I think it's going to be important to understand what does the future of the work look like for them after having survived such a precarious time. If people have a problem getting opportunities because their merit is not there, their ability is not there, you could actually help people improve their merit. Look back further into their family life and say, you know what? This is not really acceptable as a community. We need to do better to keep families together. It doesn't matter what your skin color is. Everyone brings the same action to the game. But it's important that people understand when they're young that they do need to focus on certain priorities because life is not just full of handouts. It really isn't. There are ups and downs. It's a much more difficult question to try to figure out how do we give everyone opportunity and teach them that, you know what, you need to have certain priorities in life to succeed. And you do have to work harder than the people you're competing with to become successful. Skin color isn't enough and gender isn't enough. You have to bring actual ability to the game. Also from Inside Higher Ed, what DEI professionals in red states are thinking. Caleb Briscoe spoke with Inside Higher Ed about the effects of bans on DEI staff members and how they're navigating this politically volatile time. At the start of the year, anti-DEI bills and executive orders continue to sweep the country. Indiana Governor Mike Braun signed an executive order on January 15th eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion work by state agencies and replacing DEI with MEI, or Merit, Excellence, and Innovation. West Virginia Governor Patrick Morrisey also issued an executive order banning DEI initiatives at all public institutions in the state. They join a growing number of states imposing such restrictions. DEI professionals bear the brunt of this legislative onslaught as colleges struggle to respond. Some have lost their jobs while others are continuing to work under chillier conditions, new titles, or the auspices of different offices. As a fellow of the University of California National Center for Free Speech and Civic Engagement, Caleb Briscoe, assistant professor of adult and higher education at the University of Oklahoma, conducted a series of qualitative interviews with 31 DEI professionals at higher ed institutions in states with proposed or enacted DEI bans. The goal of the project was to better understand staff members' experiences doing DEI work in this political climate and the ways they've been affected by DEI bans and their college's varied responses. Inside Higher Ed asked this, when you did the interviews with diversity professionals, what themes emerged, and were there any that surprised you? She said this, Some of the things that I described within the report were the overcompliance issues. Before these executive orders and bans come, campus leaders are making the decision to remove staff, services, offices, and funding. And I think that's become some of the most disheartening pieces, hearing that people know their jobs are on the line, their livelihoods, their humanities are on the line for misinformation and disinformation campaigns. If you want a full-time political job, go get a full-time political job. If you want to push racism, CRT, and nonsensical concepts and try to get a full-time job doing that, that's a political job. That's not a job that's going to be funded by the state. She continued, Texas legislators, for example, when they wrote SB 17, they weren't thinking about women's centers or LGBT centers. They were specifically talking about DEI offices. But that's what happened because institutions overcomplied. Because they shut down women's centers and LGBT centers because that got caught up with all the DEI nonsense they were pushing in Texas. Now, they don't need to have LGBT centers where LGBT people can meet up. They can do that on their own. That doesn't need to be funded by the state anyway. She continued, and I'm giving Texas as an example, but that happened in Louisiana. That's happening in Georgia. It's happening in Idaho, happening in Nebraska, where literally administrators are saying, quote, let's get ahead of this. And staying ahead used to be renaming, reclassifying, but that wasn't enough to satisfy legislators. So they then decided to officially and unofficially dismiss and demote staff members. I've been doing videos about this subject for some time because I wanted people to see the successes that are actually happening, and I wanted to make sure our success is really happening. Just the fact that they can't just rename a center and then get away with it is a great small piece of news. Inside Higher Ed is a great source for these stories, because it's the administrators on the inside that are upset and are concerned that they are losing this battle. It's not a battle we should have to have, but it is a battle we're having to get rid of this racism and this nonsense in our colleges and our universities. She continued, and what was said about this is a lot of this is not being reported right now. UT Austin's case made national news. Everybody reported on that and how they let go of staff, but that's happening across the nation right now with these bans. And a lot of it's not hitting the news. You can't talk to local newspapers or national newspapers. You can't let people know what's happening in this moment. And I have confirmation that across the states that they're being told by provosts, presidents, communication staff that they cannot have these conversations. The other thing that I've found continuously is that they're making the environment, and they being both legislators and policymakers, as well as some institutional leaders, so chilly that staff members don't even want to do this work anymore, which is sad, she said, because they've dedicated their lives to this work. It's not just the bans that are making people leave. It's the climate. It's the attack on who they are. It did give me pause how many of the staff members, as I talked to them, were trying to get out of the field. Inside Higher Ed asked this, what are some of the factors creating that chilly environment? She said, I'll give a couple of examples. Some white students, white faculty, white staff, who are now feeling emboldened by the reenactment of the Trump administration, who feel comfortable with saying certain things in ways that they hadn't before because there was consensus and support for DEI. They're being very vocal about, quote, DEI is not necessary. Why are we spending so much money on that? In ways that didn't happen before this political moment. The bans both proposed and implemented caused chilliness. All of these states are watching and learning from what legislators are able to do in other states and try to reenact more violent measures. Because she's characterizing a lack of racism as violence. She continued, they know, quote, okay, I can't do this, but I can do this. And they've learned from the critical race theory bans. The other thing that I think is challenging is that administrators aren't communicating with staff. So your president, provost, vice president of student affairs, chief diversity officer, some are downplaying the severity of it. And then the executive orders or bans happened, and they're out of a job where there was a lack of communication or transparency and multiple cases of staff members asking for more information. I will say on a positive note, there were some chief diversity officers who were actively protecting their staff and actively working to ensure their staff had positions, negotiating with presidents, with provosts to figure out needs to protect their staff, even if it meant not protecting themselves. So there are some examples within the data where a chief diversity officer said, quote, if you keep my staff and fire me, I'll be okay. It's also disheartening that staff members that end up releasing or firing or demoting spent time renaming and reclassifying services, hours, days, months, coming up with new language, new guidance principles, trying to appease legislators, moving to terms like opportunity, belonging, and access. Because the scam didn't work. Because people are fed up with the racism. If you want to be racist, do it on your own time. Don't expect the state to pay for it, and don't expect us to stand for it. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.